Hello and welcome to So Talk with Leora Mandel and Rabbi David Aaron. Rabbi Aaron, it's such a great opportunity for me to have this conversation with you. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot is I grew up believing in God. It was instilled in me from the time I was young. And I think as we get older, just as our understanding of lots of important things about life, you hope will mature with age, so does our understanding, our belief what belief in God means has to advance and mature and deepen. But especially since this is something I've always believed in, I've been brought up in it, things still will happen. And I feel like this could be true for someone who's always believed in God, and in different kinds of ways, it can also affect someone who has chosen and later on, maybe in life, has recognized that God is running the show here. But things happen that still sometimes shake us up, make us question. Sometimes it's someone else who doesn't believe that will ask certain questions that can shake us up. Sometimes it's personal life events that we go through or things that are going on around us that even when we have what I'd say, I hope, is solid faith and belief and even mature belief, what do we do when sometimes we do have doubts? Sometimes even the ground we feel like we're standing on feels like it's starting to shake.
Right. Well, doubt is not a huge problem. It's kind of natural. We have our ups and downs. We breathe in, we breathe out. We have days and nights. Life is a vibration between, different moods and feelings. So a person shouldn't get too disturbed by doubt. I mean, the very definition of faith is that even though I have doubts, I continue. Like courage, people think a person is courageous never is gripped with fear. That's not true. That's what makes them courageous. It's they are gripped with fear and they overcome it. And what makes faith strong and committed is that when I have doubts, I look them in the face and I move on. And so I think it's important that a person shouldn't think that they would not have doubts. But the question is, I still believe in the deepest sense, people know God. And why do I say that? Because, I ask people, well, if a person says, "Well, I don't believe in God," and I'll ask them, "Well, do you believe your life matters?" So far, everybody I've asked that question to says yes. Do you believe life is precious? Yes, I do. Well, that really contradicts saying you don't believe in God because your other alternative is Big Bang. And, Big Bang is not going to be the source of making your life matter. And so I believe that most people actually have a profound innate knowing of God. And they could be an atheist, but they believe that life matters. They believe they have a purpose. But you can't have a purpose in a purposeless universe. Or they treat people, it's so interesting. You can have people that are very religious and they teach their child that God is one and they make sure that the child says Shema, you know, Hear, O Israel, God is one before they go to sleep. And yet that child grows up and doesn't believe in God. And the parents don't know where they went wrong. I mean, we educated him and we were so careful that every night he'd say the Shema. And then you could have a family, parents that are atheists and they didn't have their kids say God is one. They said God is none at the end of the day, and they hoped that they were successful educating their kid to the truth that there is no God, and that this kid ends up to be a profound believer in God. How is that possible? Because our children don't learn from what we say; they learn from what we do. So you can have somebody who says they believe in God, but they treat people like evolved monkeys. They treat people like dirt. They treat people like accidents. Well, so in their behavior, they're actually saying they don't believe in God. Then you can have people say, I don't believe in God, but they treat people with such enormous respect and value them in the deepest way. And you wouldn't do that if you really understood that we're all just an accident that happened and coming ultimately from nowhere and going ultimately to nowhere. So even when we have doubts, I think it's on the surface because I don't think anybody really doubts in the deepest depth that their life isn't valuable. And let's say a person gets to a feeling where they feel their life isn't valuable and they're depressed and want to commit suicide. The very fact that they're depressed by the feeling their life doesn't matter is a sign how in their deepest depths they believe it really should matter and they're really disturbed why they're not feeling it matters. In a very strange, ironic way, their disappointment in discovering that life is meaningless is a sign that deep down inside they have this high expectation that life should be meaningful. Why did you even have that expectation in the first place? And why does it bother you so much? So just chill out, just chill out, have a beer and relax so life is meaningless, and you're valueless and nothing really matters and that includes you. Like, why would that upset you? The very fact that in a very, very deep way it does upset us, I believe is an indication that deep down inside we are wired for faith.
Well, there's so many things that are actually so helpful about what you're sharing. One is just distilling it down and taking off the excess angst. And what I mean by that is I think a lot of times we have, I don't know, an emotion, a feeling, a concern, a doubt, and there is what it is. And then sometimes we build up a lot of angst around it. I shouldn't be feeling this way. There's something wrong with me. This isn't okay. Where is this going to lead? And we build it up and build it up and build it up. And by just pointing out, hey, this is natural, this is normal, there's cycles. There's times where it's much easier to be solid in how we understand reality, and there's times where it shakes up. It's okay. It just suddenly takes down all the buildup of sometimes that angst that we add to whatever it is that we're going through. So that was really helpful. In addition to just going back to the foundation, I think like there is a complexity to God and how He manifests in this world, and if this is what I believe, then how does it can get complex, and yet what you just did right now was share that actually let's just go back to the foundation. Let's simplify it, and instead of getting lost in the complexities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to, the phrase I once heard is give yourself permission to be human. We're human. We have our ups, we have our downs, we have our moments, and we have, sometimes we feel so clear and sometimes we don't feel so clear. And that's okay. What you need to do is reset. And so when, if a person is feeling doubtful about whether there's a God, generally it's because something's not going well in their life or something's not going well in the world. It might not be just something personal, but it might be something in the family or something in the community or even in the world news. It's like, this is not new news that there's bad news. There's a lot of bad news in the world, and it is a challenge. If God is so good, why is there so much bad? And that's a very real and valid question. But I once heard it really well that if there is a God, suffering makes no sense. But if there isn't a God, then nothing makes any sense. And I think there is bad news. And I think the news kind of focuses more on bad news. I have a friend that worked in a news station and suggested that they do every day at the end of the news something like a 3-minute good news. And it didn't fly. People didn't like it. So but what makes it news is that it's extraordinary. It's, most people have a pretty good day today. Most people. And so yeah, there is hard news and it is hard to align that there's a good God and yet there seems to be some very bad scenes, and how's that possible? And I have a book called Secret Life of God that could give some context to that, not a complete answer, but a direction of how to cope with that question, that problem. But nonetheless, I think if a person thinks back to all the good in their lives, there's just so much good. So when you hit bad times, you start to think it's always been bad. It's kind of hard to remember how good things were when you're in the middle of something really bad. And that's when you have to remind yourself, look at pictures of your kids or look at pictures of your friends or whatever. Remember the good times in the bad times. That gives you the strength to keep going so you can get back to those good times again.
Hmm.
And so generally when a person has a doubtful, lapse, it's because something's not going the way they expect it to go. And really, faith is identified in Kabbalistic teachings with humility. Because to keep your faith, you have to have the humility to say, I don't understand. As human beings, we have a very high expectation of our capacity to understand, and we want to understand God. And one of the great Hasidic masters said, a God that I could understand is not a God I could believe in. Because if I could understand him, how great could he be that he makes so much sense to my little puny mind? And so I think the very mystery that God is enveloped in is part of what makes him, great, is that I don't understand. And we try so hard and we have such expectations that we are capable of understanding God. Like AI blows my mind. I ask questions and within seconds it gives me answers. And I don't understand how this is possible. I don't understand how it's possible, but somebody does understand how this is possible. The inventors and the engineers of AI know exactly how that works. I have no clue how that works. And even if they were to explain to me how that works, because I don't have that background, I probably wouldn't understand what they're saying anyways. And so if I don't understand AI and I don't understand ways, and there's so many things in the world that I don't understand. I don't understand how I'm able to do this with my hands. I don't understand how I'm even talking. I don't even understand how I think. I think it's important that we stop expecting God to make sense to our sense and the way we make sense of things. As it says, my thoughts are not your thoughts. My thinking is not your thinking. And that is essentially the answer God gave Job, who went through a horrific life and is questioning, where is God? Who is God? How could he be doing this to me? And ultimately, God said, well, where were you when I created the world? Right? Do you understand the good I've done? Do you understand the wisdom that I've engineered this world with? So you don't understand. And it's very hard for us. It takes tremendous humbleness to accept that there are things that I just don't understand. I don't.
You're making such a good point. And as I'm thinking about what you're saying, it's so true. I'm just trying to understand, why is it with everything you were talking about, I don't understand, and I'm with you on that. It doesn't bother me. I just accept it. And then when it comes to God, it's like, what I should understand, why God would cause this disaster and all these innocent people to be hurt, or whatever the issue is, or why this is going on in my life. I mean, what do you think it is in us? Although you're saying there's a lack of humility, so I have to think about that part. But when it comes to those things, we just somehow, you're right. We don't accept. I can't understand. Other parts of life we get. I just don't understand. I accept it. I know it's real. I know it works. I know it does something. I mean, the truth is, I think if I would wait to understand the medications I take, I never would take them, and many of us would be dead if that was the point is that we have to understand things before we do them. But we know but we have faith. We believe, and it's sound knowledge. It's based on knowledge of others who do understand more, and here knowledge that God is running the world. But what is it?
Well, we're creating an image of God, and since God is all knowing and all powerful and ever in control, we want to be like God, you know. It's just we have to understand our limitations of how godly and how much like God we can actually be. And so surely the creator of the universe has got it all worked out, has a complete understanding of everything, and everything is going from his perspective with perfect timing. Everything is on track, and we're all heading to a destination of phenomenal good. But and we want to understand that, and that's not bad that we want to understand. What's just problematic is we don't know when to let go and remind ourselves that this is a moment for me to remember I'm not God. I could be godly, but I'm not God.
What you
And I'm sorry, what did you
No,
say?
what I'm just thinking, what you're sharing actually is very, to me, very insightful, because we're created in the image of God, and that really then can give me an understanding of why I want so much to understand God. Just like there's a part of me that so wants to understand myself, and it is interesting that I recognize my even my capacity, and I should try to understand myself, just like I should try to know God more, and because that way I can connect to Him more and understand what He wants from me. But even my ability to understand myself is limited. There's no way I can fully understand myself. So that's but I have to accept that. That's what I appreciate you're saying. That next step is when we hit those limits, accept that we are limited.
Right. And that's a moment of facing our humanness, which is kind of hard to do. Kind of hard to do is to face that humanness that I'm not almighty, and I don't run this world. I just work here now. A person could take tremendous amount of relaxation in being able to remind themselves, hey, I'm not the boss and I don't understand, but I'm happy that there is a boss that does understand and is guiding me, and everything's going to be all right. How long it's going to take, I don't know, but everything's going to be all right. But I'm sure I shared with you the story about a rabbi that lived a very long life, and his students asked, what is your secret? And he said, people are disturbed by the world and they ask God, why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to them? So God says, you want to know? Come on up, I'll show you. So I don't ask why, and he's kept me in this world. So I'm not in a hurry to get all the answers. And, so it says that God created the human being and blew into that human being the breath of life, which is when you blow into someone the breath of life, you're transmitting some of yourself into this person, and so some of the divine is within us, and that's why we have at our core a design to be like God, because there's something about God that actually rests within us and spirits us. And but we're still not God.
Mm.
And part of the definition of not being God is not being almighty and not being in total control of the universe and not understanding. It's the same thing with worry. Worry is just the most ridiculous thing in the world. One of my teachers said that when you worry, you are either a fool or a prophet because either you think that you can prophetically figure out what's going to happen, or you're a fool that you can anticipate what's really going to happen. But thinking about what's going to happen doesn't stop it. And rather having a good day today because of a worry of a bad day tomorrow, you mess up today and possibly even tomorrow.
Mm.
But it goes back to this incredible desire to control that we think if we worry, somehow we can make a difference to the situation. But you don't make a difference to the situation by worrying. You can plan, you can prepare yourself. But most people, their worries are based on gets to a very irrational place and they start anticipating things that never happened. And generally, when you look back at all the things you worried about, almost none of it actually ever happened. But it goes back to this desire to control, to understand, to be like God. God knows what's going to happen. I want to be able to anticipate and predict what's going to happen. And that's again that fabulous moment to remind myself, I'm not God. I'm not God, but I can be godly.
Mm. And what you just shared, just like it really ties in the beginning to now towards our end. I just felt this sudden like release because when you said there's a boss, I'm not the boss. I just work here. And when you said I'm not God, but I'm supposed to be godly, it really when you said we have to like reorient ourselves, I'm not sure I'm remembering the word you used, but part of this is again is I maybe that's the problem. When I start almost taking on too much responsibility, I can get overwhelming and I can start questioning and being unsure. But you really distilled it once again to say, there's a boss, there's a God. I'm not God. Won't understand everything. But what I do need to do is be godly. And the question to ask is, what does God want from me in this situation? I may not understand the situation or why it's happening, but it actually really gives a focus because it takes off this burden that maybe we're carrying too much. I'm not the boss. There's a boss, right? And it gives me back, okay, but what should I be doing right now? And that's a whole nother story. And that's actually a whole different kind of energy of focus and activity when the question isn't why is this happening, but what should I do now?
Right. Well, I heard it put very well. There's three businesses. There's my business, your business, and God's business. And most people are in the wrong business. And that's what gives them tremendous frustration and heartache. You're in the wrong business. Keep to your business. What's really your responsibility? What are your tasks? And keep your nose in your business. And so my business is what I need to do today and God's business is to run the entire world. I don't run the world, right? I do the best I can to direct the little world around me that I'm responsible for. But there's just so much that is out of our control, and we're trying to take control of that which is not our business. It's not our responsibility.
Well, you definitely just released, I think, a lot of pressure, tension, angst from many people who, whether at this moment are having some struggles or caring too much, or as you said, there's night, there's day, as part of being human. And even part of being human in a relationship with God is there's times where we have much more clarity. There's times we get a little bit muddled and we have to just reorient ourselves and get back on track. So I want to thank you, Rabbi Aaron. This was fantastic. I want to thank you all for joining us. Soul Talk, Rabbi David Aaron and Leora Mandel.